A quiet hospital hallway fell silent the moment Keanu Reeves heard a trembling child's voice, singing one of his own songs, to a mother who couldn't hear him. But when Keanu stepped closer, something happened that left even the doctors stunned. And what he did next would change all three of their lives forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Keanu Reeves had slipped out of the charity gala as quietly as he had entered it, choosing to walk the few blocks to the hospital rather than ride with security. He preferred silence after long nights like this, especially when the event had been centered around children battling illness. That kind of pain stayed with him. It always had. He walked with his hands in the pockets of his black jacket, head slightly lowered, thinking about the families he had met earlier, the ones who thanked him simply for showing up. He never understood why gratitude came so easily to people when he felt he had done so little. Kindness to him was not something to be praised. It was something to be practiced. The automatic doors of St. Anne's Medical Center opened with a soft hum as he stepped inside. The smell of antiseptic rose immediately sharp and familiar, pulling him into memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. Long nights in waiting rooms, unanswered questions, machines that beeped with indifferent rhythm. He paused, taking a slow breath before walking toward the elevators. He planned a brief visit just to check on a foundation-sponsored program in the pediatric wing. He didn't want attention. He hoped not to be recognized. He simply wanted to make sure the kids had everything they needed. When the elevator doors opened on the third floor, the hallway stretched out before him in muted beige and soft blue tones. The wing was unusually quiet for early evening. Most rooms had dimmed lights, their occupants already drifting into restless hospital sleep. A few nurses moved quietly from room to room, their footsteps soft against the polished floor. Keanu walked slowly, taking everything in with the same gentle presence that made people trust him so easily. He was halfway down the hall when he heard it. A faint sound, a child's voice, soft, fragile, trembling. He stopped walking. The hallway was still, almost unnaturally so, but the sound flowed through it like a thread, pulling him forward. At first, he thought it might be someone humming, but as he listened closer, he recognized the melody. His heart tightened in his chest. It was "Stay With Me," the ballad he had recorded years earlier for an indie film that never made it into wide release. Almost no one knew the song. It had never charted or been promoted. It was personal, written during a time in his life filled with grief and longing. He remembered the recording session as if it had been yesterday. The dim studio lights, the ache in his throat, the quiet plea woven into every note. He had poured everything into the song because it was the only way he knew how to process pain. Hearing it now, in this empty hallway sung by a child, shook him to the core. He followed the voice slowly, careful not to make noise. With each step, the sound grew clearer. The boy's voice was quivering, breaking occasionally, as though he was fighting to stay strong. There was fear in it. There was love, too. A kind of love Keanu understood all too well. When he reached the slightly open door at the end of the hall, he stopped. He didn't announce himself. He didn't move. He simply listened. Inside the dim room, a young boy sat beside a hospital bed, his small shoulders hunched forward, his fingers wrapped tightly around the hand of an unconscious woman. His mother. Machines surrounding her blinked steadily, their soft beeps filling the silence between the boy's trembling lyrics. He was singing through tears. He was singing to keep hope alive. He was singing as if the song itself were a lifeline. Keanu stood motionless, breath caught in his chest. The scene mirrored too many memories he had tried to bury. His sister's long battle with leukemia, the nights he spent sitting beside her hospital bed, praying she would open her eyes, his mother's moments of weakness and strength, the quiet terror of helplessness. The boy's voice cracked on the final line of the chorus, and Keanu felt something inside him shift. He could not walk away. He could not pretend he had not heard. He stepped toward the door, heart pounding with quiet urgency. Keanu stepped inside the room, not knowing that what happened next would change all three of their lives forever. The boy didn't notice him at first. His forehead rested against the back of his mother's hand, his body trembling with each shaky breath. The fluorescent light above the bed flickered softly, casting pale shadows across his small frame. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled as though he had slept in them for days. Keanu could see exhaustion woven into every line of his body, the kind children should never have to carry. Keanu took another step inside, slow and gentle, not wanting to startle him. The floor creaked. The boy's head lifted immediately. Tear-streaked cheeks, red, tired eyes. A child trying desperately to be brave. For a moment, confusion crossed the boy's face as he tried to understand who had entered the room. But then recognition flickered in his eyes. His lips parted slightly, though no sound came out. He didn't gasp or shout. He didn't move toward Keanu. He simply stared as if unsure whether he was seeing something real or imagining comfort where there was none. Keanu raised a hand slowly, offering a soft, reassuring gesture. "Hey," he whispered, keeping his voice low, warm. "I'm sorry if I scared you. I heard you singing." The boy swallowed hard, wiping his face with the back of his sleeve. His voice came out barely audible. "I didn't think anyone heard me." Keanu stepped closer now, near enough to see the rhythmic rise and fall of the mother's chest. Her skin was pale, but peaceful, her body supported by machines that hummed quietly. He could sense the uncertainty in the room, the fragile balance between hope and fear. "I did," Keanu replied softly. "Your voice? It's beautiful." The boy lowered his gaze, embarrassed. I don't know what else to do. They say she can hear me even if she can't wake up. So I sing the songs she loves." Keanu felt his throat tighten. He glanced toward the woman again, feeling an ache rise in his chest. He remembered singing for his sister, whispering words she couldn't answer. He remembered how powerless he felt, and how desperately he had hoped that somehow his voice reached her. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. "Evan," the boy whispered. "Evan Mitchell." Keanu nodded slowly. "Evan, you're doing something really important," he said, "and you're not alone anymore." Evan's chin trembled as he tried to hold himself together. His fingers tightened around his mother's hand, as if afraid she might slip farther away if he let go even for a moment. Keanu moved quietly to the chair beside him, lowering himself slowly, giving the boy space to breathe. The room felt suspended in time, held together only by the soft beeping of the monitors and the fragile bond between a frightened child and the woman who meant everything to him. "How long has she been like this?" Keanu asked gently. Evan wiped at his eyes again. 12 days. They say she's fighting, but she hasn't opened her eyes once, not even a little." His voice cracked. "I just want her to come back." Keanu nodded with deep understanding. "I know," he murmured. "It's one of the hardest things a person can face. Watching someone you love stay so still." The boy leaned closer to his mother, his voice trembling. "I sing to her every day. She loves your song. She said it made her feel safe." He looked up at Keanu, eyes shining with helpless hope. "Do you think she can hear me?" Keanu felt the weight of the question settle in his chest. He looked at the woman on the bed, at the peaceful stillness that belied the fight happening inside her. Then he turned back to Evan. "I think voices carry farther than we realize," he said softly, "especially when they come from someone who loves you." A small breath escaped Evan, something between relief and sorrow. Keanu rested a hand lightly on the arm of the chair, grounding himself. This moment felt familiar, too familiar, and yet something about it was different, something that pulled him forward instead of back. He leaned closer to Evan. "May I stay for a little while?" he asked. Evan nodded without hesitation, and in that quiet hospital room, the 3 lives that would soon become intertwined took their very first breath together. Evan Mitchell sat with a stillness that did not belong to a child. His small frame leaned toward his mother, as if he could shield her from whatever held her trapped beneath the surface of sleep. Keanu watched him for a moment, trying to understand how a boy this young could carry something so heavy without collapsing under it. Evan's voice had trembled when he spoke, but it carried an unmistakable resolve. It was the resolve of someone who had grown up faster than life intended. Keanu shifted slightly in the chair, speaking softly so his voice wouldn't disturb the fragile quiet. "You've been here all this time," Evan nodded, eyes fixed on his mother's pale hand. "I don't want her to wake up alone." His voice was barely a whisper. "She doesn't like being scared." Keanu felt something twist in his chest. He leaned forward slightly. 12 days is a long time to stay in a hospital. Have you been sleeping here?" Evan shrugged one shoulder as if the question didn't matter. "The nurses bring me blankets. Sometimes they make me go to the family room, but I come back before they wake up." He spoke with a kind of quiet defiance, the kind rooted in love rather than rebellion. Keanu studied him more closely. Evan looked 9, maybe 10. His hair was tightly curled and messy from sleeping in chairs. His eyes were large and expressive, dark with exhaustion, but bright with a strength that came from something deeper than youth. He had a gentle presence, one that seemed shaped by the need to be careful around the world. His mixed features, his light brown skin, the soft freckles scattered across his cheeks made him look both young and impossibly wise. "What about school?" Keanu asked gently. "I've been doing the worksheets they gave me." Evan reached into a worn backpack on the floor and pulled out a stack of papers, edges crumpled. "But I can't really think about school right now." He set them back down. "Mom always helped me with homework. It feels weird without her." The mention of homework, something so ordinary, struck Keanu deeply. Illness robbed families not only of moments, but of the normalcy that made life feel safe. He turned his attention to the woman lying on the bed. Rachel Mitchell looked peaceful, but Keanu could sense the struggle happening beneath that stillness. She was in her early 30s, her skin drained of color from the infection that had overwhelmed her system. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, tangled and soft against the stark hospital linens. Keanu wondered what she had been like when she was healthy. He imagined her laughing, teaching, singing with her son. He imagined how hard she must have fought for both of them. Evan followed his gaze. "She's a teacher," he said quietly. "3rd grade. She loves reading to her students. She makes voices for all the characters, even the boring ones." His lips twitched into the faintest smile. "Sometimes she would practice the voices with me while she cooked dinner." Keanu nodded, listening carefully. "She got sick really fast." Evan continued. "At first she thought it was the flu, but then she fainted in our kitchen, and they brought her here." His small hands tightened. "They said it was a viral infection that attacked her organs. They keep saying to be patient, but—" His voice faltered. "It's been 12 days. Keanu could feel the boy fighting to stay hopeful. It was the kind of hope a child shouldn't have, to measure carefully, piece by fragile piece. Evan took a shaky breath. "They say she might be able to hear me, even if she can't wake up. So I sing to her. It's what she asked me to do if anything ever happened." He looked down. "I promised her I'd never stop believing in her." Keanu's chest tightened again. This boy was carrying a promise big enough to break a grown man. And yet he stayed. And yet he sang. Keanu let the quiet settle for a moment, giving Evan space to breathe. The boy's fingers moved lightly over his mother's hand, tracing the shape of her knuckles, as if reminding himself that she was still here, still warm, still fighting. The monitors glowed softly beside her, their rhythm steady but distant, like a heartbeat echoing through water. Keanu had seen that look before, the mixture of fear and devotion on Evan's face. It was the face of someone who refused to accept defeat even when the world demanded it. "Was it just the two of you at home?" Keanu asked gently. Evan nodded. "It's been just me and Mom for a long time." His voice softened. "Dad died when I was 6. They said it was an accident at the construction site." A beam fell. He paused, his throat tightening. "Mom cried for days, but she never let me see her fall apart. She always told me we were a team." Keanu felt the weight of those words. A team. He knew what it was like to cling to the one person left in the world who made things feel possible. "What was your dad like?" he asked. Evan hesitated, searching for the right memory. "He liked to sing too," the boy said. "Not good, but funny. He would sing while shaving, while cooking, while driving. Sometimes he changed the words on purpose to make Mom laugh. She would pretend to be mad, but she wasn't really." A small smile flickered across his face. When he died, Mom kept singing. She said if we stopped filling the house with sound, it would feel empty. Keanu nodded, feeling something inside him shift. She sounds like someone who loves deeply. She does. Evan's voice trembled. That's why I have to love her back the same way. Keanu looked at the boy, marveling at how someone so young could have such an instinctive understanding of loyalty. Evan turned toward his backpack again, pulling out a small notebook covered in doodles and stickers. He opened it to show page after page of song lyrics written in uneven handwriting. She taught me how to write songs, Evan said proudly. Not full songs yet, but little ones. She always said singing makes feelings lighter. Even the heavy ones. His eyes dimmed. But when she got sick, the feelings got too heavy. So I started singing your song, the one from the movie. It was her favorite. She used to play it when she was sad. Keanu felt a quiet ache spread through him. He remembered writing the lyrics at a time when grief had nearly undone him. He never imagined they would find their way to a little boy and his mother in a hospital room years later. Evan looked up at him again. Do you think music really works? I mean, do you think she can hear it in there? Keanu took a deep breath before answering. I think music reaches places that words can't, especially when it's filled with love. He glanced at Rachel, her chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. And I think a mother always hears her child, even when the world makes it seem impossible. Evan's eyes glistened, but he nodded with conviction. Then I'll keep singing, he whispered, every day, because I promised her, and because I don't want her to feel alone. Keanu felt a warmth rise in his chest, not comfort exactly, but a fierce admiration. This boy had lost one parent and was fighting with everything he had not to lose another, and yet he carried himself with a bravery far beyond his years. Evan looked back at his mother, tightening his small hand around hers. She's my whole world, he said, and I'm not giving up. Keanu watched Evan lift his mother's hand and press it gently against his cheek, as if trying to share warmth with her. The boy whispered something soft, a promise only she was meant to hear. Keanu felt the room shift in a way he couldn't explain, as though love itself had weight. Evan straightened, wiping his eyes. I'll keep singing, he said quietly, no matter how long it takes. Keanu felt the certainty in the boy's voice. In that moment, he understood completely. This wasn't just hope, it was devotion, and it was stronger than fear. The hallway outside Rachel Mitchell's room remained quiet as Keanu stepped out for a moment, letting the weight of Evan's story settle in his chest. He leaned lightly against the wall, taking a steady breath, trying to gather himself. Encounters like this always stirred something deep inside him, something he thought time had softened, but never truly erased. He was about to return to the room when the soft voices drifted from the nurse's station nearby. Poor kid, one nurse whispered. 12 days, barely eats, barely sleeps, keeps singing for her every night. Another nurse sighed. He refuses to leave her side, says he won't go home until she wakes up. Keanu listened quietly, his heart tightening. They continued talking, unaware he was within earshot. He's the sweetest boy, the first nurse said. Always thanks us even when he's scared. I wish there was more we could do for him. He's holding on by sheer love, the second nurse replied. If his mother doesn't improve soon, I don't know how he'll handle it. Their voices lowered, but the sorrow in them lingered. Keanu stepped closer, offering a gentle smile so as not to startle them. They recognized him instantly the way people always did, but instead of excitement or fuss, their expressions softened with quiet understanding. This wasn't a moment for fan reactions. This was a moment soaked in fear and hope. The older nurse spoke first. Mr. Reeves, we didn't realize you were visiting this wing. Is everything all right? Keanu nodded. I heard singing earlier. I met Evan. His voice remained soft, steady. I was wondering if it would be okay if I spent some time with him. The two nurses exchanged a look, moved by the sincerity in his tone. Of course, the younger nurse had said. He could use someone to sit with him, but we can keep your visit private if that's what you prefer. Keanu's expression warmed. Thank you. Yes, please. I'm not here for attention. "We know," the older nurse replied with a gentle smile. "That's why we'll make sure you have the space you need." With a quiet nod of appreciation, Keanu returned to Rachel's room. He paused at the doorway for a moment, watching Evan. The boy had resumed humming the melody of "Stay With Me," his voice tender but strained. The way he clung to the music made it feel like the song itself was keeping him upright. Evan looked up when Keanu re-entered. His eyes widened again, as if he still couldn't believe the man standing before him was real. Instinctively, the boy wiped his cheeks with his sleeve, embarrassed to have been caught crying twice. Keanu moved slowly, giving him time to adjust. When he reached Evan's side, he lowered himself to one knee so he could look the boy directly in the eyes. "Your voice," Keanu said gently, "is beautiful. Truly. And your mom is lucky to have you." Evan swallowed hard, his breath trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to cry so much." "It's all right," Keanu replied. "Crying doesn't make you weak. It just means your heart is doing its job." Evan blinked, trying to absorb the words. Keanu offered a small smile, soft and steady. "Can I sit with you for a while?" The boy nodded quickly, almost afraid the offer would disappear if he hesitated. Keanu rose and took the chair beside him. Together, they watched Rachel's peaceful, unmoving face. After a moment, Evan touched the hem of his shirt nervously. "Do you want me to keep singing?" Keanu's voice was warm. "Only if you feel like it." Evan took a breath, lifted his mother's hand, and began again. And this time his voice carried a new strength, shaped by the quiet presence of the man sitting beside him. Evan's voice trembled at first, the way it often did, when fear pressed too tightly against his ribs. But as he sang the opening lines, something shifted. Maybe it was the calm way Keanu sat beside him, hands resting quietly in his lap. Maybe it was the simple fact that someone was finally sharing the weight he had carried alone for nearly 2 weeks. Whatever it was, the melody grew steadier, warmer, shaped by hope instead of desperation. Keanu listened with a stillness that surprised even him. He had heard countless voices across his life, trained musicians, studio performers, talented friends. But Evan's voice carried something different. It carried love. It carried longing. It carried a child's refusal to let the world take away the one person who made it feel safe. That kind of sound didn't belong to technique. It belonged to the heart. When the boy reached the chorus, his voice cracked just slightly, but Keanu didn't flinch. He leaned a little closer, offering silent reassurance. Evan noticed and took a shaky breath before pushing forward. His small fingers curled softly around his mother's hand as he sang. "She used to sing this part," Evan whispered between lines. "Right here. She always said this melody felt like a hug." Keanu nodded gently, remembering his own sister saying something similar about music during her hardest years. The memory pressed against him, but he let it stay, using it to understand Evan in a deeper way. "You're doing beautifully," Keanu said quietly. Evan lowered his gaze, cheeks warm with shy pride. "Mom said your voice made the song feel alive. She said you didn't just sing it, you meant it, even when you whispered the words." Keanu looked down for a moment, swallowing the lump that rose unexpectedly in his throat. That song had come from one of the most painful chapters of his life, and he had never expected anyone to understand the real weight behind it. Yet here was a 9-year-old boy repeating his mother's words, reminding him that art had a way of reaching people long after the moment it was created, even in hospital rooms where hope flickered like a dying candle. Evan continued speaking softly. "She said the song helped her after my dad died. She said it felt like someone finally understood what her heart was trying to say." Keanu exhaled slowly. "Your mom sounds like a very strong person." "She is," Evan said immediately, as though strength were something he had memorized in her. "But she's tired now, and I'm scared she can't hear me anymore." Keanu shook his head gently. "Evan, she hears you. Maybe not the way you want, maybe not the way you can see, but she hears you." Evan's eyes grew glossy. "How do you know?" "Because love doesn't disappear," Keanu answered softly. "Even when people close their eyes, your voice reaches her because it comes from the same place hers once came from." The boy pressed his lips together, fighting tears. Then he took another breath and sang the next verse. This time, Keanu closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. The melody curled through the room with surprising strength, touching everything in its path. Nurses passing by slowed their steps, glancing in with softened expressions before continuing down the hall. There was something sacred about the moment, a boy singing his heart open. A mother suspended somewhere between silence and returning light, and Keanu quietly anchoring the space with his presence. When Evan reached the final line, his voice faltered again. Keanu placed a gentle hand on the back of his chair, steady and supportive. "You're not alone in this," Keanu said softly. "Not anymore." The room felt quieter than before, as if the air itself had paused to listen. Evan sat close to his mother, still holding her hand, his eyes red from crying, but steadier than they had been earlier. Keanu watched him gently, seeing the tremble in his fingers, the way he kept glancing at Rachel's face, as though searching for the slightest hint of movement. After a long moment, Keanu leaned slightly toward him. His voice came out soft, like a calm invitation. "Evan, would you like me to sing with you?" The boy's head snapped up. For a moment, he looked stunned, unsure if he had heard correctly. He blinked rapidly, mouth slightly open, but no words came out. He simply nodded, small and hesitant at first, then again with more certainty. Keanu offered a warm smile. "All right," he said. "Let's sing it together." Evan shifted in his seat, taking another shaky breath as he prepared himself. His hand tightened around Rachel's, as if drawing strength from the contact. Keanu moved his chair closer, close enough for their voices to blend, but far enough to give Evan space to lead. He started the first line softly. His voice was low and gentle, shaped with care, the kind of tone that carried warmth even in silence. Evan joined him on the second line, his young voice trembling but steadying with each word. Their voices met in the middle, weaving together with surprising ease. The song filled the room in a fragile, intimate harmony. It was not loud, it was not polished, but it was true. Every note held something raw and honest, something that reached beyond the edges of sound and touched the deeper places where pain and hope lived together. Outside, a passing nurse slowed her steps. She turned her head toward the door, eyes widening. Another nurse joined her, quietly drawn by the sound that flowed through the hallway like a soft wave. Soon, 2 more staff members approached, standing with hands pressed against their chests, listening in reverent silence. Inside the room, the singing continued. Evan clung to his mother's hand as if it anchored him. Keanu watched him between lines, letting the boy's voice lead his own tone, gently supporting it. The machine beside Rachel flickered with subtle changes, faint jumps that hadn't appeared before. Evan noticed it first. His voice broke mid-word. He gasped softly, eyes fixed on the monitor. "Keanu, look." Keanu turned. The readings showed a small rise in neural activity. Not dramatic, but unmistakable. Hope, thin as a thread, pulled tighter in the room. Dr. Maya Torres, making her evening rounds, paused when she saw several nurses gathered outside a room. She stepped toward them, concern rising, but when she heard the soft music drifting through the doorway, her expression softened. She moved closer, peering inside, watching the boy and the actor singing quietly beside a sleeping woman. Her gaze shifted to the monitor. The small spike repeated. She blinked. Then she stepped in silently, observing with professional focus, but undeniable emotion. Keanu continued singing even as he saw her enter. His voice remained steady, shaped by purpose rather than performance. When the verse ended, he leaned closer to Rachel and whispered, "You raised an incredible son, and he's fighting for you with everything he has." Evan's voice shook, but he kept singing. And for the first time in 12 days, he didn't feel alone. Dr. Torres stepped closer to the bed, her eyes scanning the monitor with practiced precision. She had been caring for Rachel since the day she was admitted, and she knew every plateau, every unchanged reading, every discouraging fluctuation. But this was new. Small, yes, but impossible to ignore. A faint lift, a ripple in the still water. She lifted her gaze to Evan, who was singing with his eyes partly closed, his voice fragile but determined. Then she looked at Keanu, whose presence was steady and grounding, as if he were holding the entire room in calm silence. There was no need for applause, no expectation of attention. He sang the way someone prays, quietly, honestly, from a place marked by its own scars. When the chorus returned, Evan's voice rose with more confidence. Keanu followed, harmonizing in a way that wrapped gently around the boy's trembling tone. Dr. Torres watched the monitors spike again, slightly higher this time. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make her inhale sharply. A nurse standing behind her whispered, "Is that real?" "It's real," Dr. Torres murmured. She wrote down the numbers, quickly documenting the shift. Her eyes softened as she glanced back at the boy. She had always admired his strength, but seeing it now, amplified by music, by love, by the presence of someone who understood pain in a way few could, moved her more deeply than she expected. Rachel's eyelids fluttered, only for a second, a tiny flickering movement like a dream passing through her. Evan didn't see it, but Dr. Torres did. Her breath caught. She didn't speak. She didn't step forward. She knew the value of letting a moment unfold without interruption. Inside the room, Keanu and Evan reached the bridge of the song, voices dropping to a gentle intensity. Evan leaned closer to his mother as he sang, pressing her hand against his cheek. His voice wavered on the highest note, but he didn't stop. He pushed through tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. Keanu felt something shift inside him, something familiar and painful and full of awe. He remembered sitting beside his sister's bed, whispering encouragements into the quiet. He remembered the fear that sat in his chest like a stone. He remembered how deeply he had wanted to give her hope, even when he didn't know how. He leaned closer to Rachel, lowering his voice to a near whisper between the lines of the song. "Your boy loves you. He's fighting so hard for you. And he's not giving up." Evan's voice faltered on the next word, but the moment he sensed Keanu steadying the melody beside him, he gathered himself again. He sang with renewed strength, his small shoulders rising with determination. The nurses watching from the doorway wiped tears quietly. This was not a dramatic miracle, not a sudden awakening, but something equally powerful. It was a soul being reached, a connection being rebuilt, a child doing everything he could to bring his mother back. As the final verse approached, Evan shifted closer to the bed, his forehead nearly touching his mother's arm. Keanu softened his tone, allowing the boy's voice to take center stage. The sound echoed faintly through the hallway, turning heads, drawing silent onlookers who felt something stir inside them. When the last note drifted into stillness, Evan opened his eyes slowly as though returning from somewhere deep. He squeezed his mother's hand and whispered, "I'm right here, Mom." Keanu placed a hand lightly on the boy's back. "You're doing something beautiful," he said, "and she's holding on to every bit of it." The room settled into a soft stillness after the final note faded. Evan kept his eyes on his mother, waiting, hoping for even the smallest sign that she had felt the music he poured into every word. His thumb brushed gently across her hand, tracing the lines he knew by heart. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Keanu watched him carefully, sensing the weight of the silence pressing down on the boy's shoulders. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "She heard that, Evan. I promise you." Evan's lips trembled, but he nodded, believing him because he needed to, because having someone beside him, someone steady, someone who understood loss, made the hope feel more real. Dr. Torres stepped forward, then placing a gentle hand on Evan's shoulder. "You did something important just now," she said softly. "Your singing triggered a positive response. It means her brain is still fighting." Evan's breath caught. "Really?" She nodded. "Really?" The boy pressed his forehead against his mother's arm, tears slipping quietly down his face. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew she could hear me." Keanu felt emotion rise in his chest as he watched the boy cling to the small but meaningful victory. It wasn't a miracle, it wasn't recovery, but it was movement, and movement meant hope. He leaned toward Rachel again, speaking softly to her. "You raised a strong, brave son. He's doing everything he can to bring you back." Evan reached for Keanu's sleeve, not pulling, just grounding himself. "Thank you for singing with me," he said quietly. "I didn't feel scared this time." Keanu placed his hand gently on Evan's. "You don't have to be scared alone anymore." And for the first time in 12 long days, Evan believed that. The soft glow of the overhead lights dimmed into evening mode as the hospital settled into its nightly quiet. But Keanu didn't move from the chair beside Evan. The boy's shoulders, still tense from days of fear, slowly began to loosen as Keanu remained there, steady and calm, offering something Evan hadn't felt since his mother collapsed, a sense of safety. Keanu leaned back slightly, hands folded in his lap, letting the room breathe. "You know," he said gently, "when I was younger, I had no idea how to play guitar. I loved music, but my fingers just wouldn't cooperate." He gave a small laugh. "I almost quit." Evan looked up at him, curious, despite the fatigue that pulled at his eyelids. "But you didn't." "No," Keanu replied. "Someone told me something I never forgot. They said, if the music matters to you, your hands will catch up." And they did. Slowly. The boy nodded, absorbing every word. "My mom always said things like that. She said music wasn't about being perfect. It was about saying something you're too scared to say out loud." Keanu felt that resonate deep inside him. Rachel had passed that wisdom down well. He shifted forward. "Your singing today, it wasn't just music, it was love, and she felt that." Evan blinked back tears. "I'm trying so hard. I don't want to lose her too." The words came out in a whisper, but they carried the weight of a child who had been holding far too much. Keanu's chest tightened as he watched the boy struggle to hold himself together. Evan pressed his palms into his eyes, trying not to cry, as if crying might make things worse. Keanu reached out slowly, giving him enough time to pull away if he wanted. When Evan didn't, Keanu rested a warm hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're not going to lose her without a fight, and you're not fighting alone anymore." The boy's breath shook. "What if she doesn't wake up? What if I'm all alone?" Keanu exhaled softly, steadying himself before replying, "I know what that fear feels like. I've lived through it." He paused, letting the honesty settle gently instead of heavily. "But even in the worst moments, I wasn't alone. Someone always showed up. The world has a way of sending people when you need them most." Evan swallowed, his voice trembling. "Then, is that why you came?" Keanu nodded. "Maybe I was supposed to be here today. Maybe you were supposed to hear someone say that you're not alone." The boy's face softened, a fragile hope beginning to replace the fear that had lived there for days. He wiped his cheeks with the back of his hand. "I don't want to be a problem for anyone." "You're not a problem," Keanu said firmly, leaning in to meet his eyes. "You're a brave kid who loves his mom. That's something the world needs more of." A small, hesitant smile appeared on Evan's face, the first genuine one Keanu had seen from him since stepping into the room. The heaviness in the air began to lift, replaced by something quieter but stronger, the beginning of hope. A gentle silence filled the room, the kind that didn't feel empty, but full. Evan leaned back in his chair, his breathing steadier now, and Keanu could tell the boy was beginning to let go of the fear he'd been gripping so tightly. The machines hummed softly beside Rachel's bed, and the faint rhythm of their beeps became almost soothing. Keanu glanced at Rachel, her face peaceful beneath the soft halo of the bedside monitor's light. "Your mom is strong," he said quietly. "Strong people fight hard, even when they can't show it." Evan nodded, staring at her hand wrapped in his small fingers. "She always works so much," he murmured. "She takes extra shifts at the school. She helps kids who don't speak English yet. She never says no to anyone." His voice faltered. "But I think I made things harder for her." Keanu looked at him with gentle surprise. "How could you make things harder?" Evan shrugged, eyes lowering. "She worries about me a lot. When Dad died, she said I became her whole world, and sometimes I hear her crying in her room. She tries to be strong for me, but I know she's tired." Keanu felt those words pierce him like a quiet blade. He knew what it was like to watch someone you love carry too much. He knew what it was like for a child to feel responsible for things far bigger than they understood. "Evan," he said softly, "your mom doesn't see you as a burden. She sees you as hope, as the reason she keeps going. Loving someone doesn't weigh you down. It gives you the strength to keep moving. He let that sink in. You didn't make things harder. You gave her something worth fighting for. A small breath escaped the boy, almost a sigh of relief. The room warmed with the soft amber glow of the evening sun filtering through half-closed blinds. Evan folded his knees up to his chest, resting his chin atop them. "What about you?" he asked quietly. "Were you ever scared like this?" Keanu's eyes softened. Yes. He didn't offer details. He didn't want to shift the weight of the room, but he spoke with honesty. "I've lost people I love, and I've sat in hospital rooms praying for miracles too. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care." Evan looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I think she hears me. Sometimes I think the song helps. But what if it doesn't?" "You keep singing anyway," Keanu said. "Not because it guarantees anything, but because love isn't about guarantees. It's about presence. And your presence matters more than you know." Evan wiped at his eyes again, but this time the tears didn't fall from fear. They fell from release. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small card. The paper was thick, minimalist, with a handwritten number on the back. He held it out to the boy. "This is a private number. It goes directly to someone at my foundation. If you ever need help, anything at all, you call, okay?" Evan's eyes widened, his fingers shaking as he accepted the card. "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure," Keanu said with a gentle smile. "You're carrying a lot for someone your age, and no one should carry something like that without support." Evan held the card as carefully as if it were made of glass. He didn't say anything for a moment. He couldn't. But his trembling smile said enough. As the night deepened, the hallway outside grew quieter. Keanu remained beside Evan, sensing the boy's exhaustion finally beginning to overpower the fear that had kept him awake for nearly 2 weeks. The child's eyelids fluttered as he tried to stay alert, afraid that if he slept, something might happen to his mother while he wasn't watching. Keanu leaned closer. "It's okay to rest," he said softly. "Your mom needs you strong, and you've done more today than most adults could ever manage." Evan hesitated. "What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" Keanu smiled gently. "She'll know you were. She'll feel it." He placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "And I'll be back tomorrow. That's a promise." Those words settled into Evan like warm sunlight. His breathing slowed, and his small body finally gave in to the exhaustion it had carried for days. He curled against the chair, still holding his mother's hand, his chest rising in steady rhythm. Keanu pulled a thin hospital blanket over him, careful not to wake him. He glanced once more at Rachel, her stillness now less frightening and more hopeful after the day's small miracle. The faint memory of her neural response during the song replayed in his mind, and he felt something shift inside him, a belief that today had been the beginning of something important. He stepped back toward the doorway, pausing to take in the quiet scene. A brave boy asleep at last, a mother fighting to return, a song that had reached somewhere medicine couldn't touch. Before leaving the room, Keanu whispered one final promise into the dim light. "Keep listening, Rachel. He's singing for you, and tomorrow we'll be here again." And for the first time since she fell unconscious, Evan slept in peace. The first light of morning crept into the pediatric wing, turning the hospital's pale blue walls into soft shades of gold. Nurses began their quiet rounds, their footsteps gentle on the polished floor. Room 417, however, already held a different kind of energy. Something subtle, something new. A shift in the air that no one could quite describe yet. Rachel Mitchell's monitors told the story before anyone else realized it. Her brain activity, which had remained stubbornly flat for nearly 2 weeks, showed a slow but undeniable rise. Small spikes, gentle waves, signals her doctors had been desperate to see. At first, her night nurse thought it was a calibration issue. She checked the wires, reset the device, and watched again. The spikes remained. They grew. By the time Dr. Maya Torres arrived for morning rounds, she found the nurse standing at Rachel's bedside, eyes fixed on the screen with cautious hope. "Doctor," the nurse whispered, "you should see this." Dr. Torres leaned in, expecting another heartbreaking plateau. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. "That's not an artifact," she said softly. "That's genuine cortical response." She flipped through the overnight log, comparing the flat readings from earlier in the week to the sudden growth starting just after midnight. The exact time lined up almost perfectly with when Evan had finally fallen asleep, holding his mother's hand, and when Keanu had whispered those quiet words of hope before leaving. Dr. Torres pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself. "She's fighting her way back." Moments later, Evan stirred in his chair, still curled under the hospital blanket Keanu had tucked around him. His neck ached, his eyes were puffy, but for the first time in days, he woke with a sense of lightness he couldn't explain. He blinked at the sun-drenched room, looked at the monitors, and gasped. "Is she better?" he asked, rubbing his eyes as he scrambled upright. Dr. Torres knelt down beside him, meeting him eye to eye. "Evan, your mom is showing signs of improvement. Real signs. Her brain activity increased overnight." The boy's mouth fell open. Hope flashed through him so fast it almost frightened him. "Does that mean she heard us?" he whispered. "It means something reached her," Torres replied, "and it's the best progress we've seen since she arrived." Evan turned toward his mother, gripping her hand gently, his voice trembling. "Mom, I'm here. I'm still here." He pressed his forehead to her knuckles. "I told you I wouldn't stop singing." With renewed determination, he picked up the small notebook where he'd written down the lyrics to their favorite song. His voice, though tired, held strength it hadn't before. He began singing softly to her again, filling the room with the same melody Keanu had harmonized with the day before. Nurses in the hallway slowed as they passed, hearing the boy's voice, seeing the rise in Rachel's vitals with each verse. Word spread quietly among staff. The mother from 417 was responding. Something extraordinary was happening. And though Evan didn't know it yet, someone else had felt pulled back to the hospital long before dawn broke. Keanu Reeves was already on his way. By mid-morning, Evan's voice had filled the room for nearly an hour. His throat burned and every breath carried a tremble, but he refused to stop. The hope Dr. Torres had given him earlier acted like fuel in his chest. He sang gently, then louder, then back to a whisper as though trying to reach every part of his mother's mind at once. The song had become more than music. It was a lifeline. Nurse Olivia stepped inside with fresh linens, but paused when she saw Rachel's monitor. Her eyebrows lifted. "Evan, look at her oxygen levels. They're stabilizing." The boy's eyes widened. "Is that good?" "It's very good," she said softly, squeezing his shoulder before stepping out to inform the staff. As Evan continued the verse, he didn't hear the footsteps approaching from the hallway. He didn't notice the shadow in the doorway, but he felt something. A presence, a familiar, quiet warmth. When he lifted his head, Keanu Reeves was standing just outside the room, a gentle smile softening his tired features. "You came back," Evan whispered, almost in disbelief. Keanu stepped inside, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, as if trying not to disturb the fragile miracle unfolding. "I told you I would." He looked at Rachel at the subtle but undeniable signs of her return. "And it looks like I came at the right time." Evan hurried to him, wiping his eyes. "Look, she's better." Torres said her brain is waking up. She said something reached her last night. The boy's words came out in quick bursts, his excitement spilling into every syllable. "She said, 'Mom is fighting.'" Keanu kneeled to meet him at eye level. "I believe that," he said, "and I believe you helped her get there. But I want her to hear me." Evan said, voice trembling with longing. "I want her to know I didn't leave her." Keanu glanced at Rachel, her breathing deeper than yesterday, her eyelashes fluttering ever so slightly as though responding to distant sound. "Then let's sing again," he said quietly. "Together." Evan's breath caught. He nodded so quickly it made Keanu smile. They pulled chairs close to Rachel's bedside, the room becoming a small sanctuary of hope. Evan held his mother's hand while Keanu sat on her other side. He waited for the boy to begin. Evan inhaled shakily, then opened with the first tender line of "Stay with Me," the ballad that had become their anthem. His voice cracked, but he kept going. Keanu joined him softly, at first blending his voice with the boys until the sound became one unified thread carried into the quiet room. There were no cameras, no lights, no audience, just a child, a mother, and a man who understood more than he ever voiced. Outside the door, nurses slowly gathered again, drawn by the gravity of the moment. Dr. Torres approached silently, her pen clicking softly as she monitored the instruments. And that was when it happened. Rachel's breathing shifted smooth, deeper, rhythmic. Her chest lifted with more strength, as though the song were guiding her back. The heart monitor displayed a steady rise, each beat firmer than the last. Keanu froze, mid-note, eyes darting to the machine. Evan gasped, leaning forward. Mom, do you feel that I'm here? I'm right here." His voice shook with a mixture of fear and joy, but he didn't stop singing, not for a second. The hospital hallway fell completely silent, except for the soft sound of their voices and the faint growing rhythm of Rachel's pulse, steady alive. Something extraordinary was beginning. As the song reached its final chorus, the air in the room seemed to tighten with anticipation. Evan's voice trembled on the last note, and he leaned in closer to his mother, tears streaking down his cheeks. "Mom, please, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand. Just a little. Just once." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Rachel's fingers twitched, barely a movement at first, small, almost delicate. But it was real, and it was hers. Evan gasped so sharply it echoed. "Mom!" He cried out, voice breaking into pure disbelief. "That's you. I know it's you, Mom. I felt that. Please do it again." The boy's tears fell faster, his tiny shoulders shaking as he pressed her hand to his cheek. "I knew you could hear me," he whispered. "I knew you were trying." Keanu stood, frozen eyes shining, witnessing the moment as if it were something sacred. His throat tightened, and he exhaled slowly, steadying himself as emotion washed over him. He glanced at Dr. Torres, who was already rushing forward, stunned but composed. "Get a reflex assessment kit," she told a nurse. "She's emerging." The hallway erupted into a flurry of movement, but inside the room, time felt still. Rachel's fingers twitched again, stronger this time, as though responding to Evan's voice, to the song, to the love pulling her back from the quiet darkness she'd been trapped in. Dr. Torres leaned over the bed, her face glowing with disbelief and relief. "Evan," she said softly, "your mom is waking up. This is the beginning." The boy let out a sob of joy so raw it made everyone in the room tearful, and Keanu placed a steady hand on Evan's back, whispering, "She heard you. All this time she heard you." The hospital quieted again by early afternoon. After the emotional whirlwind of the morning, Evan sat beside his mother with a calm he hadn't felt in 12 long days. He kept tracing small circles across the back of her hand, whispering soft reassurances, as if afraid the miracle might slip away if he stopped speaking to her. But Keanu, standing near the window with his phone tucked discreetly to his ear, had something else in mind. He faced away from the hallway, speaking in a quiet but urgent tone. "I know it's last minute," he said, "but I could really use your help. It's for someone who needs a little bit of light, a little bit of music." On the other end came a warm voice full of curiosity. "Is this the kid you mentioned, the one singing your old song?" "Yeah," Keanu replied. "He's incredible. His mom's just starting to wake up, and I want to give them both something special." There was no hesitation. "Say no more. We're in." Keanu smiled softly. "You sure it'll be a hospital room? No audience, just heart." "That's the best kind," his bandmate said. Within minutes, a second call was made. Another voice, another immediate yes. Dogstar wasn't a huge touring band anymore, but the friendships had lasted deeper and longer than fame or schedules. They knew Keanu didn't ask for things lightly. If he was calling it mattered. By the time Keanu slipped his phone into his pocket, a quiet spark of anticipation flickered in his eyes. He approached Evan slowly, not wanting to break the boy's tender focus on his mother. "How's she doing?" Keanu asked. Evan looked up, hope glowing in his tired expression. Her hand moved again. "Not a lot, but I felt it." "That's good," Keanu said gently. "That means she's trying." Evan nodded, but his voice softened with a cautious uncertainty. "Do you think maybe she heard us again when we were singing earlier?" Keanu knelt beside him. "I think your voice reaches places medicine can't." The boy breathed in sharply, letting those words settle. The room felt warmer somehow, filled with a quiet promise neither of them could quite name yet. A soft knock sounded at the doorway. Nurse Olivia leaned in with an unusual brightness in her eyes. "Mr. Reeves? They're here." Evan blinked. "Who's here?" Before Keanu could answer, two men stepped into the hallway, each carrying guitar cases slung casually over their shoulders. One had long, sandy hair tied back in a loose ponytail, his face kind and relaxed. The other, slightly older, wore a denim jacket covered with patches from decades of gigs. Evan's jaw dropped. "Are those musicians?" Keanu's smile widened. "They're friends of mine." He gestured them inside. "This is Rob and Jordan. They play with me sometimes." The musicians greeted Evan with soft voices, careful not to disturb the fragile calm of the room. Even so, the sight of their instruments transformed the atmosphere instantly. What had been a quiet medical space now felt like the beginning of something magical. Evan looked between them, speechless, overwhelmed by disbelief and gratitude swirling through his small frame. Are you going to play for my mom?" Keanu placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is for your mom," he said, "and for you." The musicians moved quietly, treating the small hospital room with the respect of a sacred stage. Rob set his guitar case on a rolling stool and opened it slowly, revealing a worn acoustic instrument with a warm, honey-colored finish. Jordan followed suit, tuning gently each string, ringing soft and pure in the still air. Evan watched with wide, astonished eyes. He had seen guitars before, even held one once, during a school music day, but seeing real musicians prepare to play for his mother felt unreal. It felt too big, too generous, too beautiful to be happening in a place that had held so much fear for him. Keanu noticed the boy's trembling hands and knelt beside him again. "You okay?" he asked softly. Evan nodded, but the breath that followed shivered. "No one's ever done something like this for us," he whispered. "Mom loves music. She used to sing to me every night. She said songs could make people feel safe." Keanu's expression softened even more. "Then let's give her that feeling again." Dr. Torres stepped into the room just then, stopping abruptly when she saw the instruments. "Mr. Reeves," she said, lowering her voice, "the staff told me you arranged something special." "If it's all right with you," Keanu replied politely. "Nothing loud, just an acoustic session, something to help her stay connected." Dr. Torres glanced at Rachel, then at her monitors, which had held steady improvement since the morning. "If music brought this kind of response before, then yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." She stepped back toward the hallway, signaling the nurses to keep the corridor clear and quiet. Word spread quickly but discreetly. Something extraordinary was about to happen in room 417, and the hospital intended to protect the moment. Meanwhile, Rob lightly strummed a warm chord, the sound blending with the faint hum of medical equipment. Jordan adjusted his capo, testing soft harmonics that shimmered through the air like gentle bells. Evan pressed a hand over his heart. Keanu pulled up a chair beside him and lowered his voice. "We'll start with something simple, something your mom might recognize even if she's deep inside her recovery." "What song?" Evan asked. Keanu exchanged a glance with his bandmates. "A song about waiting, about holding on, about love that doesn't give up." Rob nodded and began a slow, rhythmic picking pattern. Jordan layered a delicate harmony over it, creating a sound that felt like warmth drifting through a cold room. The music spread softly across Rachel's bed, filling every corner with something peaceful, familiar, and deeply human. Keanu leaned closer to Evan. "When you're ready, sing with us." Evan's eyes widened. "Me?" "You," Keanu said. Your voice is the bridge that brought her this far. Let it carry her a little more." Tears welled again, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from hope. As the musician settled into the opening chords, Evan held his mother's hand, inhaled once, and prepared to sing again. This time, surrounded by a band supported by the man who had refused to let him walk this journey alone. The room brightened with music, and Rachel's monitors were already beginning to respond. The melody grew richer as Rob and Jordan eased into the heart of the song, their playing gentle enough not to overwhelm the fragile calm of the room, yet powerful enough to fill the space with warmth. Evan's voice entered softly at first, a trembling whisper carried on the rhythm of the guitars. Keanu added quiet harmonies beside him, steady and grounding, giving the boy a confidence he didn't know he could still feel. Evan leaned closer to his mother. "This is for you, Mom," he whispered before singing the next line. Almost immediately, Rachel's heart rate monitor responded, the pulse rising with each phrase of the melody. Her breathing deepened, chest lifting with more effort, as if her body recognized the sound and reached for it with everything it had left. Dr. Torres, watching from the doorway with a mix of awe and professional restraint, took a step inside. "She's responding again," she murmured. Keanu didn't stop singing, but he glanced at Evan long enough to see the boy's expression fill with hope, so powerful it almost overwhelmed him. Evan squeezed his mother's hand as he continued the verse, his voice strengthening with every word. Jordan shifted into a soft harmony. Rob deepened the bass notes. The music wrapped around Rachel like a protective blanket, gentle but insistent, urging her upward from the edge of unconsciousness. Then, in the middle of a rising chord, Rachel's eyelids fluttered. Evan froze mid-note. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Mom, can you hear us?" Her fingers twitched again, stronger than before. Her mouth moved slightly as though trying to form a word she couldn't yet reach. Keanu placed a steady hand on Evan's back. "Keep singing," he whispered. "She's almost there." Evan wiped his eyes and did exactly that. His voice, now shaky with joy, joined the guitars again. The room felt alive, charged with a quiet electricity that pulled every nurse in the hallway closer to the doorway. No one dared enter. No one dared breathe too loudly. They simply watched, tears pooling as music coaxed a mother closer to waking. Rachel's chest lifted in a deeper inhale, her eyebrows knit, faintly responding to the sound. Her monitors displayed a steady, undeniable climb. Dr. Torres covered her mouth with one trembling hand. "My God," she whispered. And Keanu, eyes bright with emotion, leaned closer to Rachel and spoke softly into the music. "You're not alone, Rachel. Come back. Your son needs you." The next morning arrived gently with the soft glow of sunrise slipping through the half-closed blinds of room 417. The hospital was quiet at that hour, the kind of calm that made every sound feel sacred. Evan sat beside his mother's bed legs, tucked beneath him, holding her hand with both of his. His voice, though raspy with exhaustion, floated through the room in a fragile melody. He was singing the song he had sung nearly every day since she collapsed, the one she used to hum while packing his school lunches, the one she whispered when he had nightmares. His voice carried a tremble of hope and fear woven tightly together. He didn't know if she could hear him, but he sang anyway, because singing was the only way he knew how to keep her close. "Stay with me. I'm right here. Don't let go." He paused between lines, swallowing hard, blinking back tears he didn't want to shed so early in the morning. He wanted strength. He wanted patience. He wanted to believe the small miracles of yesterday were building toward something even bigger today. Behind him, the door opened silently. Keanu stepped inside without a word, dressed simply in a dark hoodie and jeans, his hair still slightly damp from a rushed morning shower. He slipped into the room with the same quiet respect he had shown since he first followed Evan's voice through the hallway. He didn't speak or move toward the bed right away. Instead, he sat down in the empty chair behind Evan, folding his hands and listening. The boy didn't notice him at first. He was too focused on his mother, studying every rise of her chest, every faint shift in her breathing. He finished the verse and took a trembling breath before starting again, his voice softer than before. Suddenly, Rachel's fingers twitched beneath his palms. Evan froze. His entire body went still, as if the world had stopped spinning. His eyes darted to her hand, watching for any sign that what he felt wasn't just his imagination. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking into a breathless plea. "Mom, was that you? Please, please do it again." Keanu leaned forward quietly, heart tightening as he witnessed the moment unfold. He didn't dare speak. He didn't want to shift a single thread of what was happening. Rachel's fingers twitched again. This time, the movement was stronger, purposeful, a small squeeze that carried more meaning than any word could have in that moment. Evan gasped so sharply it echoed off the walls. His tears came instantly hot and unstoppable as he clutched her hand to his chest. "Mom," he whispered, voice shaking. "Mom, please open your eyes. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time." Her eyelids fluttered. Keanu straightened in his chair, unable to look away. The room felt charged with quiet electricity, as though the space itself were holding its breath. Rachel tried again. Her eyelids lifted in small, slow motions, revealing a faint glimpse of brown beneath them. Her breathing deepened, the muscles around her mouth shifting as she fought her way back to consciousness. And then, for the first time in 12 long days, her eyes opened fully. She blinked once, adjusting to the light, to the shapes in front of her, to the reality she had almost slipped away from. The first face she focused on was her son. Rachel blinked slowly, her gaze sharpening as the world came back into focus. She looked confused at first, as though unsure whether she was dreaming or waking. But when her eyes finally settled on the small figure beside her bed, everything inside her seemed to shift. "Evan," she whispered, her voice barely audible, rough from days of stillness. The boy collapsed forward with a cry of pure relief, wrapping his arms around her as gently as he could, afraid she might disappear if he held too tightly. Tears streamed down his cheeks, falling onto the thin hospital blanket. "Mom, I'm here. I'm here," he repeated, his words broken by sobs. "I never left. I sang for you every day. I told you I wouldn't stop." Rachel lifted a trembling hand and brushed her fingers across his cheek, her movements weak but full of love. "I heard you," she murmured, closing her eyes as emotion washed over her tired features. "I heard everything. Your voice. It kept me close." Evan sobbed harder, burying his face against her shoulder. For a moment, the two of them clung to each other in silence, their bodies shaking with the release of fear they had carried for far too long. Keanu stood slowly, giving them space. He stepped back toward the window, lowering his head, overwhelmed but steady. This moment belonged to them. It was theirs alone, and he wanted nothing more than to protect the sanctity of it. Rachel's gaze drifted past Evan as she drew a slow breath, her eyes settling on the man standing quietly in the background. Confusion softened into recognition. She blinked, trying to reconcile the face she saw with the memories that had floated through her mind during the long, dark days when she couldn't wake. "Mr. Reeves," she whispered. Keanu offered a gentle smile. "Hi, Rachel. It's good to see you awake." Her brow trembled as her eyes filled with tears. You were here. All this time?" "Not all the time," he said softly, "but enough to hear your son sing. He loves you fiercely." Evan pulled back slightly, wiping his face with the back of his sleeve. "Mom, he helped me. He stayed with me. He sang with me." Rachel covered her mouth with her hand, struggling to absorb the weight of everything happening around her. Emotion overwhelmed her, joy, disbelief, gratitude folding into one. From the hallway, a cluster of nurses watched through the doorway with tearful smiles. Some pressed tissues to their eyes, others held each other's hands. They had witnessed countless recoveries, but there was something different about this one, something intimate and deeply human. Rachel looked again at Keanu, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Thank you for giving my son hope." Keanu shook his head gently. He already had hope. He just needed someone to stand beside him while he held on. The room slowly settled into a peaceful quiet after the initial rush of emotion. Rachel lay upright against her pillows, still weak but fully aware, her hand never leaving Evan's. She kept brushing her thumb across the back of his small fingers as if convincing herself that he was truly there and that she had finally come back to him. Evan stayed pressed against her side, refusing to let go even for a moment, still overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. Keanu remained near the foot of the bed, quiet and respectful, giving them space. Whenever Rachel looked at him, gratitude swelled visibly in her expression, but she seemed almost afraid to speak, afraid that words would never be enough. A soft knock interrupted the quiet. Dr. Torres entered with a gentle smile that broke into something close to triumph when she saw Rachel awake and alert. "Rachel," she said warmly, "you gave us quite a scare." Rachel managed a breathless laugh, then winced at how drained her voice sounded. I didn't mean to." "You fought hard," Dr. Torres replied, adjusting the monitors. "Your progress this morning is remarkable. Your reflexes are returning and your vitals are stabilizing. Honestly, I'm amazed." Evan lifted his mother's hand proudly. She squeezed my fingers. "Twice." "I saw it," Keanu added softly. Rachel turned toward him, her eyes filling again. "I remember," faintly, hearing voices, she said. "Songs, someone talking to me. It felt warm. It felt like hope." Evan leaned closer. "That was me, Mom. I sang every day. I told you not to give up." Dr. Torres glanced at Keanu, and he didn't sing alone. Rachel looked between them, shock mixing with emotion. You sang with him?" Keanu nodded gently. "We just wanted you to feel less alone." Tears slipped down Rachel's temples. She covered her mouth with her free hand as a quiet sob escaped. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You helped my son stay strong when I couldn't. You helped him when he must have been terrified." Evan looked up at Keanu with a small smile. "He stayed with me, Mom. He talked to me. He told me stories, and he brought musicians, real musicians." Dr. Torres let out a soft laugh. The entire floor heard it. "You should have seen the nurses trying not to cry in the hallway." Rachel shook her head slowly, still overwhelmed. "I don't understand why you would do all that for us." Keanu stepped closer, keeping his tone warm but humble. "Because your son is extraordinary," he said. "He never gave up on you. He believed in you even when the world felt too heavy for him. I just stood beside him while he held on." Evan squeezed his mother's arm. "He's being humble again, Mom." Keanu chuckled softly. "No, I'm telling the truth." The room filled with a soft, shared warmth, one that didn't feel like a hospital's typical sterile atmosphere. Instead, it felt like a family gathering, like people who had been through something powerful and unexplainable together. For the first time in days, Rachel's breathing steadied with something close to peace. Dr. Torres continued her evaluation, checking Rachel's reflexes and asking gentle questions about orientation and memory. Rachel answered slowly but clearly, surprising even herself with how much she could recall. She remembered faint sensations, distant voices, and a warmth that seemed to hold her whenever she drifted toward the darker edges of unconsciousness. When Dr. Torres stepped out to update the medical team, Rachel took a long, steady breath and turned fully toward Keanu. "I don't know how any of this happened," she said softly, "but I know that my son wasn't alone, and that means everything to me." Keanu pulled up a chair, sitting close enough to speak quietly, but far enough to give her space. "He's a strong kid," he said. "Stronger than most adults I know. He stayed awake night after night just to keep singing for you. He refused to stop believing." Rachel ran her fingers through Evan's hair, marveling at the boy who had stayed so brave during her collapse. "You shouldn't have had to carry that alone," she whispered to him. "I didn't," Evan said quickly. "He was with me, Mom, every day." Rachel met Keanu's eyes again, shocked by her son's words. "You stayed with him for days." Keanu shook his head with a modest smile. "Not every day, but enough. Enough to remind him that he didn't have to be afraid. Enough to hear the way he sings for you." Her eyes filled with tears. "You did more than that," she said. "You brought him courage. You brought music. You brought hope into this room when I couldn't fight for myself." Keanu lowered his gaze, humbled by the depth of her gratitude. "Your son is the real hero here," he answered softly. "He's the one who kept believing. I just followed his lead." Evan beamed at those words, leaning against his mother's side. For a moment, all three shared a quiet pause that felt like a breath after a long storm. Rachel studied Keanu's face with genuine wonder, the kind people reserved for miracles they never imagined witnessing firsthand. "How can I ever repay you?" she asked. "You don't need to repay anything," Keanu replied. "Just get stronger. Be here for him. That's all he wants." Rachel nodded, emotion overwhelming her again. "Then I will," she whispered. "I'll get better. I promise." The afternoon unfolded gently around them. They talked together, not as strangers separated by fame or circumstance, but like a small family drawn together by something deeper. Rachel told Keanu stories of Evan's childhood, the way he used to build drum sets out of cereal boxes, the bedtime songs they shared, the laughter that filled their tiny apartment. Evan jumped in with his own stories, giggling at memories he had forgotten during the long days of fear. Keanu listened with quiet joy, offering pieces of his own past when they asked. He spoke about learning guitar, about films that had taught him humility, about his own experiences with hospitals and family struggles. He never made the conversation about himself, but he let them see enough for connection to form naturally. In the hallway, nurses whispered to each other with soft smiles. They peeked through the open doorway, their hearts warmed by the sight of a recovering mother, her devoted son, and the man who had walked into their lives like a quiet guardian. The story spread through the floor, without a single photo being taken, without a single person posting online. It stayed protected, honored, shared only in hushed voices among people who understood the miracle they were witnessing. Inside the room, Rachel squeezed Evan's hand again, and for the first time since she collapsed, the boy smiled without fear. The afternoon sun dipped lower through the hospital windows, spreading a soft amber glow across room 417. The atmosphere felt different now, lighter, hopeful. Rachel's strength was still fragile, but her spirit had returned. Evan stayed close to her side, his hand wrapped around hers, as though afraid she might drift away again if he let go. Keanu watched them with quiet affection. Moments like this, moments of healing, of reconnection, always left a lasting imprint on him. He knew the work of recovery was only beginning, but he could also sense something stronger at play in this room, something that had carried all three of them through the darkest hours. After a while, Keanu stood and walked toward the corner of the room where he had placed a small black case earlier in the day. It was compact, slender, and carried with deliberate care. Evan didn't notice at first. He was too busy adjusting the blanket over his mother's legs, making sure she was comfortable. Keanu cleared his throat gently. "Evan," he said, "there's something I want to give you." The boy looked up, puzzled. When Keanu opened the case, Evan's eyes widened, his breath catching instantly in his chest. Inside was a beautiful, small-body acoustic guitar crafted in smooth, dark spruce with delicate maple edging. It was sized perfectly for a child, yet built with the same quality and precision as a professional instrument. Evan stared at it in stunned silence. His lower lip trembled. Is that for me?" Keanu nodded softly. "I've seen how much music means to you, how much heart you put into it. You sang your mother back to us. You deserve something to help you keep going." Evan pressed both hands to his mouth as he fought back tears. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then he whispered, "I've never had a real instrument before." Rachel looked at the guitar, then at Keanu, overcome by emotion. "Mr. Reeves, you can't possibly." "Yes, I can," Keanu said, cutting her off gently. "And please call me Keanu. Your son has a gift. I want him to have every chance to grow it." Evan reached out with trembling fingers, touching the guitar's polished wood, as if it were something sacred. He lifted it carefully, holding it to his chest. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he looked up at Keanu again. Without thinking, he stood and wrapped his arms tightly around him, burying his face against Keanu's side. "Thank you," Evan cried. "Thank you so much." Keanu embraced him with steady warmth. "You're welcome, kiddo. Take care of it. Let it be your voice when you don't have the words." Rachel wiped tears from her eyes as she watched them. She couldn't speak, not yet. Gratitude pressed against her chest so strongly it made breathing difficult. She had walked through the edge of darkness, and somehow in her absence, her son had been blessed by a kindness she could barely comprehend. Keanu knelt to meet Evan's gaze. "Music helped you stay brave," he said gently. "Someday you'll use your voice to help someone else. I believe that." Rachel watched her son cradle the small guitar with a tenderness that made her heart ache. She could see the way his shoulders relaxed for the first time in days, the way hope settled into him like a warm light. It was as if Keanu had handed him more than an instrument. He had given him a future to hold on to. "Keanu," Rachel said softly, her voice still uneven, but sincere. "This is far too generous. I don't know how to begin thanking you." "You don't need to thank me," Keanu replied. "I'm just trying to return something he already gave me." Rachel frowned gently. "What could he have possibly given you?" "Reminding me what courage looks like," Keanu answered. "And what faith sounds like." Evan brushed his fingers across the strings, letting out a soft gasp when the gentle vibration hummed through the room. He looked at his mother with a shy smile. "Mom, listen. It's real. I can make real music." Rachel lifted her hand and touched his cheek, overwhelmed. "You've always made real music, sweetheart," she whispered, "even when you were singing from a chair beside me." Keanu stepped back, giving them space, but there was one more thing he needed to do. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. He didn't hand it to Rachel immediately. Instead, he looked at her with a transparency that felt almost vulnerable. "There's something else," he said quietly. Rachel hesitated. "What is it?" He offered her the envelope. "Just open it when you feel ready. No rush." She took it with trembling hands, her thumb brushing across the unmarked paper. She slowly unfolded it and froze. Inside was confirmation of a large fund deposit anonymously given directly toward her medical bills and recovery costs. Her breath caught. No, Keanu. This is too much." "It's not," he said softly. "It's exactly what needs to be done." "I can't accept this," she insisted, shaking her head as tears filled her eyes. "You've already given us so much. You helped my son. You stayed with him. You helped me come back. This is too much kindness for one family." Keanu stepped closer, his expression warm but firm. "Rachel, listen. You're a mother, a teacher, someone who gives more than she ever takes. Life hits you harder than most. Let someone carry the weight for you this time." Evan tightened his grip on the guitar, his eyes bouncing between his mother and Keanu. "Mom, please," he whispered. "Let him help. Please don't be scared." Rachel covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. The relief of everything, her awakening her son's resilience, the music that carried her through, and now this flooded her all at once. She lowered her head, letting the tears fall freely. "Thank you," she said at last, her voice a broken whisper. "I don't know how to repay something like this." "You don't have to," Keanu said. "Just get better. That's the only repayment I want." Rachel nodded through her tears. "I will," she said with conviction. "For him. For us. I'll get better." Evan set the guitar carefully on the chair, then leaned forward and wrapped his arms around his mother, holding her with all the strength he had left. Keanu watched them quiet and steady, knowing he had given them the one thing they needed most room to rebuild their life with hope instead of fear. 3 months passed, and the world that once felt unbearably fragile for Evan and Rachel slowly transformed into something steadier, brighter, and full of promise. Spring sunlight filtered through the windows of their small apartment each morning, warming the kitchen where Rachel now prepared breakfast before work. Her movements were still careful, her energy not fully restored, but the strength in her voice and the warmth in her smile showed how far she had come. She had returned to her job as a school teacher, greeted by colleagues who had prayed for her recovery, and students who had made her dozens of welcome back cards decorated with hearts and glitter. Every day she walked into her classroom, she felt gratitude settle deeper in her chest. She was alive. She was healing. and Evan was thriving in ways she never could have imagined during those terrifying days in the hospital. Each afternoon after school, Evan put on his small backpack, slung his little acoustic guitar over his shoulder, and walked with his mother toward the same hospital that had once been filled with fear. Now, it felt like a second home. The staff welcomed him with open arms, calling out his name the moment he stepped through the automatic doors. "There's our star nurse," Olivia said each time he arrived, her face lighting with pride. Evan would blush shyly, then hurry down the hallway, his footsteps soft but full of purpose. He didn't go there because someone asked him to. He went because something inside him felt called to return, not in fear, but in gratitude. Music had saved his mother. Now he wanted to use that gift to help others. He visited room after room, knocking gently before entering. Some patients were elderly and tired, worn down by weeks of illness. Others were children fighting battles far heavier than their small bodies could carry. But each time Evan lifted the guitar into his lap and strummed the first soft chord, something changed in the air. Shoulders relaxed, faces brightened, the atmosphere eased into warmth. He played simple melodies, at first ones he had practiced over and over until his fingers felt natural against the strings. Then he added lyrics, some from songs he knew, some from words he made up on the spot. His voice, once shaky and afraid, now carried a quiet confidence that touched everyone who heard it. No matter how small you are, he often sang softly, "Your voice can save someone." The nurses stood in the hallway to listen sometimes, tearing up, sometimes humming along. His presence became a form of therapy, not just for patients, but for the entire staff. People healed a little faster when he was around. Smiles came easier. Hope stayed longer. Rachel watched from doorways as her son played, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and emotion so deep she sometimes had to wipe her eyes before he noticed. She knew he was becoming someone remarkable, someone kind, someone strong. And through it all, Keanu remained a quiet presence in their lives. He called every week, always from an unlisted number linked to his foundation's private line. The conversations were never long or dramatic. They were simple check-ins. "How's your mom doing? How's school going? Still taking care of that guitar?" Evan answered each question with excitement, often ending the call with, "Thank you again for everything." Keanu always replied the same way, "You did the hard part. Just keep going." As the weeks unfolded, Evan's visits became a cherished routine within the hospital. Staff members often rearranged their break times just so they could linger near the rooms he played in. Even doctors paused in the hallway to listen to the soft chords drifting through the air. The boy who once cried himself to sleep in a waiting chair had become a source of comfort for people who needed it most. Some days he played upbeat melodies for children recovering from surgeries. Other days he chose slow, soothing songs for elderly patients who missed their families. And sometimes he simply sat beside someone who was lonely, strumming quiet notes until the room felt less cold. But no moment touched him more deeply than when he returned to room 417. It belonged to a new patient now, but whenever he stepped inside, he felt a familiar warmth. The memories never hurt. They reminded him of the miracle he helped create. Nurses often asked him if he wanted to skip that room, but he always shook his head. "This is where she came back to me," he would say. "I like bringing music here." Rachel watched all of this unfold with a gratitude that grew by the day. Each evening as she closed her classroom door, she thought of how close she had come to missing these moments. Every breath felt like a gift she didn't take lightly, and though her body healed slowly, her spirit felt stronger than ever. One evening after Evan finished visiting patients, they walked home together under the soft glow of streetlights. He carried his guitar case, proudly swinging it slightly with each step. Rachel linked her arm with his, feeling the quiet rhythm of his joy. "Mom," he said suddenly, "do you think I can help people with music when I grow up?" She smiled at him with tears in her eyes. "You already are," she whispered. Evan looked down, hiding a shy smile, but the truth of her words settled warmly inside him. That night, Keanu called again. Evan answered eagerly, telling him about the patients he played for, and the new song he had written about hope. Keanu listened with genuine care, letting the boy speak without interruption. "You're doing something beautiful," Keanu said when Evan finished. "Keep using your voice to lift people up. That's how you change the world." Evan held the phone close, feeling that familiar spark of courage. "I will," he promised, and he meant every word. 1 year passed, carrying with it a quiet transformation for everyone whose lives had been touched in room 417. The hospital still remembered that story, the boy who sang his mother back from the edge, the actor who walked in quietly and stayed when he didn't have to, the miracle that unfolded through music. Nurses spoke of it in soft voices, the way people recount something sacred. It became a reminder, especially on difficult days, that hope could take unexpected forms and walk through their doors without warning. As spring returned, the hospital prepared for its annual charity gathering, a small event held in the courtyard to honor patients' families and staff. This year, the coordinator had a special idea. She approached Evan and Rachel after one of his regular volunteer visits, her eyes hopeful. "Evan," she said, "would you consider performing at the event? Just a small song. You've brought so much joy to this place. We'd love for people to hear you." Evan stared at her, stunned. "Me? In front of everyone?" Rachel smiled at him, squeezing his hand. "You can do it," she whispered. "You've been doing it all year." He hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "Okay, I'll try." On the day of the gathering, the courtyard buzzed with soft chatter as staff set up folding chairs and a small microphone stand. Strings of warm lights hung between the trees. Families drifted in, smiling as they carried blankets and cups of warm cocoa. The air felt festive, hopeful, alive. Evan stood near the small platform, clutching his guitar case. His palms were sweaty, but he wasn't afraid, just overwhelmed by the idea that 1 year ago he had been a scared boy in a hospital chair, singing desperately for a miracle. Now he was about to sing for an audience filled with people he cherished. Rachel stood beside him, healthier and stronger than anyone believed possible. She wore a long cream-colored sweater and a proud smile that never wavered. "I'm right here," she whispered, "no matter what." Evan nodded, taking a deep breath. "Do you think he'll come?" he asked quietly, though he tried to sound casual. Rachel hesitated, then brushed his hair back. "Keanu always keeps his promises," she said gently. "But even if he can't, he's already here, in everything you do." Before Evan could respond, a familiar voice came from behind him. "I wouldn't miss this for anything." Evan spun around, his eyes widening in disbelief. Keanu stood there in his usual understated way, hoodie jeans, hands tucked in his pockets, hair slightly tousled by the breeze. He blended in easily with the crowd, yet for Evan his presence made the entire courtyard brighter. "Keanu!" Evan cried, dropping his guitar case and running straight into his arms. Keanu laughed softly and lifted the boy in a gentle hug. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Look at you. A whole year older. And taller, I think." Rachel stepped forward, emotion immediately swelling in her eyes. "You came?" she whispered. "Of course," Keanu replied. "I wanted to see how far this young star has come." Evan's cheeks flushed with pride as he reached for his guitar again. Nurses who had witnessed last year's miracle began to gather nearby, already wiping at their eyes. They knew what was coming, and the anticipation tightened their chests with warmth. "Will you sing with me again?" Evan asked timidly. Keanu smiled. "Always." Evan stepped onto the small outdoor platform, his guitar resting gently against his stomach. The courtyard quieted almost immediately, as if the breeze itself paused to listen. Families turned toward him, nurses wiped their cheeks, and doctors folded their arms with quiet anticipation. Rachel stood at the front of the crowd, hands clasped over her heart, her smile trembling with pride. Keanu joined Evan on stage, pulling up a simple wooden stool beside him. He didn't want attention. He didn't need an introduction. He simply nodded, and the boy signaling he was ready whenever Evan was. Evan took a slow breath. His fingers hovered over the strings, then pressed into the first familiar chord, the same gentle opening that once filled a hospital room with hope. The melody drifted into the evening air, soft and warm, drawing every listener closer. Keanu's harmonies slipped in seamlessly, deep and steady, surrounding Evan's bright, heartfelt voice. They sang the same ballad they had sung beside Rachel's bedside, only now the fear was gone. The desperation was gone. What remained was gratitude, resilience, and the quiet echo of a miracle. When Evan reached the lyric he had once whispered through tears, "Stay with me." His voice didn't crack. It strengthened, carried, lifted into something beautiful and free. The crowd felt it instantly. Parents held their children a little tighter. Nurses covered their mouths as tears spilled freely. Even the patients who sat wrapped in blankets felt their shoulders loosen in comfort. Rachel wept openly, unable to hide her emotion. She remembered every second of that night, the darkness her son's trembling voice, the warmth she felt even when she couldn't wake. And now she stood here alive, healed, watching her boy sing with the man who had changed everything. When the final chord faded into the evening air, the courtyard erupted into applause, not loud or wild, but gentle and emotional, the kind of clapping that carries gratitude rather than noise. Evan blinked in surprise, cheeks flushing as he looked at Keanu. "We did it," he whispered. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it," he corrected softly. Rachel hurried up to the platform, pulling Evan into her arms. "I'm so proud of you," she breathed. "You saved me with that voice, and now you're helping others too." Evan hugged her tightly, guitar pressed between them, laughter mixing with tears. As Rachel pulled back, she looked at Keanu with deep emotion. "Thank you for coming back," she said. "It means more than you know." Keanu smiled gently. "I said I'd be here," he replied. "And besides, some songs deserve to be sung twice." Around them, the hospital staff wiped new tears, remembering exactly where this story had begun and how far it had carried them all. In the months that followed the charity gathering, the story of Evan and his mother continued to ripple quietly through the community. It traveled from nurse to patient, from parent to doctor, until it reached the ears of families far beyond the hospital walls. People spoke about the boy who sang his mother back to life. They spoke about the kindness of a man who showed up with humility and compassion. And they spoke about the way music bridged the gap between fear and hope. Keanu, deeply moved by how far Evan had come, began thinking about the families he'd seen during those hospital visits. Some were overwhelmed, some were exhausted, some were fighting battles they didn't feel strong enough to face. He knew Evan's story wasn't unique, even if the miracle within it was extraordinary. Countless children sat beside hospital beds every day, holding on to loved ones through uncertainty. One evening, while on the phone with Rachel, the idea surfaced naturally. "You know, Keanu said what Evan did, what music did for you both. I keep thinking about how many kids could use that same light." Rachel paused on the other end, realizing where the conversation was leading. "Do you want to create something?" she asked softly. "I want to create a way for kids to find strength," Keanu replied. "A way for them to have instruments, lesson support, something that tells them their voices matter even when life feels heavy." Rachel smiled so deeply it brought tears to her eyes. "That's beautiful," she said, "and I know exactly who your first ambassador should be." Within weeks, Keanu and his foundation launched a small but powerful initiative, Voices of Hope. Its mission was simple: to provide free instruments and music lessons to children with parents battling illness. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't designed for press. It grew quietly, sustained by donations from people who believed in the healing power of song. And just as Rachel suggested, Evan was chosen as the program's very first young ambassador. When Keanu presented the title to him, Evan froze, holding the certificate with trembling hands. "Me, but I'm just a kid," he said, his voice full of disbelief. Keanu knelt beside him. "You are the reason this program exists," he explained. "Your voice changed a life. Now you'll help others find their own strength. You'll help them believe." Evan swallowed hard, emotion rising in his chest. "I want to do that," he said. "I want other kids to feel what I felt when Mom woke up." From that moment forward, Evan embraced his role with the same pure-hearted determination he had shown in room 417. He practiced every day, learning new songs, new chords, new ways of expressing what lived inside his young heart. His fingers grew stronger, his voice grew clearer, but his compassion remained exactly the same. Soon he began visiting other hospitals, not just the one that saved his mother. With his guitar slung over his shoulder and his quiet bravery leading the way, he walked into rooms where fear lingered heavily in the air. He sang for children holding onto stuffed animals, for teenagers pretending not to be scared, for parents who needed a moment of peace, for siblings waiting in silence. And something happened in those rooms. The same way Rachel's monitors once responded, hearts responded too. Evan was creating small moments of healing, one song at a time. Parents often cried softly while Evan played, not wanting to break the spell his music cast over the room. Nurses paused in doorways, leaning against the frames, with softened expressions. Doctors slowed their pace, listening to the gentle chords drifting down the hallways. Even the most exhausted families seemed to breathe easier when Evan walked in with his guitar hugged close to his chest. He didn't perform for applause. He didn't perform to be impressive. He performed because he remembered exactly how it felt to sit helplessly beside someone you love, praying for any sign of hope. If his music could lift even one person the way it lifted him and his mother, that was more than enough. One afternoon, after visiting a children's oncology wing, Evan stepped outside to find Keanu waiting beside the entrance. He wore the same simple hoodie and jeans he always chose when he didn't want attention. A soft smile crossed his face as Evan approached. "You did good today," Keanu said. Evan shrugged, his cheeks warm. "I just wanted them to feel better." "They did," Keanu replied. "I could see it." They walked together toward a nearby bench. Rachel joined them a moment later, her energy stronger now than it had been in months. She sat beside her son, brushing her fingers over his shoulder in silent pride. "You've helped so many families already," she told Evan. "Do you realize that?" Evan looked down at his guitar. "I don't know if I'm helping them, but I want them to feel less alone." Keanu nodded, touched by the honesty of the boy's heart. That's exactly what Voices of Hope is about. Not fixing everything, not pretending pain isn't real, just making sure people know someone is standing beside them. Evan leaned against his mother, comforted by the warmth on both sides of him. "Do you think someday this program will help kids everywhere?" he asked. Keanu smiled gently. "I think someday kids will help each other everywhere. And you're the one lighting that path." Evan didn't know what to say. He simply held his guitar closer, the same gift that carried him through fear, and now guided him toward a future he never imagined. As families filtered out of the hospital, several paused to thank him. Some hugged him. Some simply smiled with tearful eyes. Every gesture settled into him like a quiet affirmation. He had a purpose now. He had a voice. And that voice, once trembling beside his mother's bedside, had grown into something powerful, something that would echo far beyond his own story. The sun was setting when the three of them finally stepped outside the hospital after another afternoon of music and healing. The sky glowed in soft shades of peach and gold, the kind of quiet evening light that made everything feel gentler. Evan walked between Keanu and Rachel, his guitar case bumping lightly against his leg with each step. He had played for 6 patients that day, and though he was tired, his heart felt full. They reached a small garden bench near the hospital entrance, a place Evan often sat when he needed a moment to breathe after playing. Today, however, Keanu guided him there with an expression that carried a thoughtful weight. Rachel followed, curious, sensing something meaningful was about to unfold. Keanu sat down first, resting his elbows on his knees. He watched Evan carefully, his gaze warm but serious in a gentle way. "Hey," he said, "can I ask you something?" Evan nodded, brushing a bit of dirt off his guitar case. "Sure." Keanu waited a moment, letting the air settle around them before he spoke again. "When you think about the future, when you think about who you want to become, what do you see?" Evan blinked, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked him that so directly. He swung his legs a little, thinking, his expression turning thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted. I used to think I just wanted Mom to get better. That was the only thing I ever hoped for. Rachel's eyes softened, her hand instinctively reaching for his shoulder. But now, Evan continued staring at his small hands. Now I think about things differently. I think about how scared I was, how lonely I felt when she was in the coma, and how everything changed when you sat with me, and when you sang with me. Keanu listened without interrupting, giving the boy space to find his own words. Evan swallowed, then lifted his gaze. I think I want to help people the way you helped us. I don't know exactly how yet. Maybe with music, maybe with kindness, maybe both. A quiet smile grew on Keanu's face, the kind that came from deep gratitude rather than pride. That's a beautiful answer, he said, and it's more than most adults can articulate. Evan blushed lightly, but he didn't look away. You didn't just help my mom, he said. You helped me understand that being strong doesn't always mean being loud or brave all the time. Sometimes it means showing up. Sometimes it means being kind. Rachel felt emotion swell in her chest so quickly she had to bring a hand to her mouth. She watched her son speak with a depth far beyond his age, and she knew exactly where that wisdom came from. Keanu leaned back a little, studying Evan with quiet admiration. You already know the path, he said softly. Just keep choosing love. If you do that, everything else will fall into place. Evan's lips curved into a shy smile. Choosing love, he repeated as if testing the words. Yeah, I like that. Evan let the phrase settle in his heart, repeating it silently, as if it were a new melody he needed to memorize. Choose love. It sounded simple, but he understood even at his young age that simple things were often the hardest to live by. Still, he felt something steady inside him, a direction forming the way a compass finds north. Rachel took a seat beside Keanu, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. Do you know what it's meant for him, having you in his life? Keanu shook his head gently. I didn't do much. You did, she insisted, emotion thickening her tone. You showed him what kindness looks like when no one is watching. You gave him courage when mine was gone. You gave him hope when he might have lost it forever. She looked at Evan with teary eyes. I couldn't guide him during those days. But you did. Keanu lowered his gaze, humbled. Rachel, he said softly, your son already had all of that inside him. I didn't put anything there. I just helped him see it. Evan shifted next to him, pressing the guitar case against his knees. But you changed me, he said quietly. Before everything happened, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't think about helping people. I didn't think I had anything special to give. You've always had something special to give, Rachel whispered. Keanu nodded. You didn't change because of me, Evan. You changed because of what you lived through, because you chose love even when it hurt, because you kept singing when the world felt scary. Evan took a long breath, letting those words settle into the foundation of who he was becoming. A soft breeze drifted over them, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from the hospital garden. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deeper gold. Keanu Evan asked after a quiet moment, Yeah, kiddo, do you think I can really make a difference someday? Like a real difference? Keanu didn't answer right away. He reached out and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, steadying him with a gentle firmness. You already are, he said. Every time you walk into a hospital room with that guitar, you change someone's day. Every time you sing, you lift someone's spirit. And the way you love your mom, that alone has changed lives. Evan blinked rapidly, his eyes shining. But what if I mess up? What if I'm not strong enough all the time? No one is strong all the time, Keanu replied. But love doesn't require perfection. It just requires honesty. It requires trying. And you do that better than most grown men I've ever known. Rachel let out a quiet breath, deeply moved as she watched her son absorb every word. It was like witnessing a torch being passed, not in a dramatic blaze, but in a soft, steady light meant to guide a lifetime. Evan looked up at Keanu again. Then I'll keep trying, he said. I'll keep choosing love. Keanu smiled warmly. That's all anyone can ask of themselves. Rachel slipped her hand into her son's, squeezing gently. In that small circle of three, framed by the fading light of day, she felt the profound truth of the moment. Keanu had not just helped save her life. He had helped shape the heart of the boy who mattered more to her than anything else in the world. And Evan Young, hopeful brave, was stepping into a future defined not by fear, but by love. The late afternoon light spilled gently across the pediatric wing, casting soft reflections on the polished floor as Evan and Keanu walked side by side. The quiet hum of distant monitors blended with the calm hallway ambiance, creating the soothing rhythm that had once been the backdrop to the scariest days of Evan's young life. Now he walked those same halls with steady steps, older in ways that went far beyond his age. Keanu paused near the corner, his eyes drifting toward a familiar stretch of hallway. It was the same place where he had first heard the trembling voice of a child singing through heartbreak. He remembered the way his chest tightened that day, how the grief in that small voice pulled him in before he even realized he had stopped moving. Now, 1 year later, he found himself returning to that moment with a heart full of gratitude and awe. "Is this really where you stood?" Evan asked, stopping beside him. Keanu nodded. "Right here." Evan looked around thoughtfully, trying to imagine himself as he had been back then, exhausted, frightened, clinging to hope through a melody. It felt like a lifetime ago. He rested his hand on the guitar case strapped over his shoulder. "Can I sing it again?" he asked softly. Keanu gave a small smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." Evan unlatched the guitar case and pulled out the small acoustic guitar, the same one Keanu had gifted him on the day everything changed. The wood had deepened in color over the months, and Evan's hands moved across it with confidence and familiarity. He positioned it gently, took a slow breath, and stepped into the center of the hallway. Behind them, a quiet rustling sounded. Rachel stood at the doorway of a nearby room, leaning carefully against the frame. Her warm smile held pride, tenderness, and the kind of emotion that has no words. She gave Evan a small nod, encouraging him. Evan lifted his chin. His voice, when it came, was steady and clear. The first notes of the ballad floated through the hallway, bright and unbroken. The gentle guitar chords echoed softly against the walls, filling the space that had once carried the weight of fear with something far stronger, healing. His voice carried a warm strength, a confidence shaped not by perfection, but by everything he had lived through. Keanu watched him closely. Every note seemed to peel back another layer of memory. The boy who once sang with trembling emotion was now standing tall, offering his voice to the hallway that had once witnessed his tears. Keanu felt the swell of emotion building in his chest, the sting of old memories pressing behind his eyes. Hospitals held more ghosts for him than he ever spoke aloud. Yet hearing Evan now seemed to quiet them in a way he had never imagined possible. Evan sang through the final refrain with a soft vibrato, letting the last chord linger on the air until it naturally faded into silence. The hallway felt still once more, but in a new way, full, vibrant, warm. Keanu drew a slow breath, unable to hide the emotion etched across his face. "Evan," he said quietly, "that was beautiful." The boy lowered the guitar. "I wanted to sing it here again, because this was where everything started." Keanu nodded, his throat tight. It was. Evan took a small step toward Keanu, his fingers still lightly touching the guitar strings. There was a softness in his expression, but also something steady, something wise beyond his years. He looked up at Keanu with an honesty that made the hallway feel even quieter. "You saved us," he said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a year's worth of healing. They carried nights of fear, mornings of hope, the trembling moments when a mother's life hung in the balance, and the miracle that followed. Keanu felt every one of those memories rush through him at once. He let the silence settle before he responded. His voice was low, gentle. "No," he said. "You saved each other." Evan blinked as if trying to understand how someone like Keanu could see something so profound in such an ordinary boy. But Keanu wasn't finished. "You stayed with her," Keanu continued. You held her hand, you sang for her, you believed when everyone else was afraid to hope. That love, that's what brought her back. I just happened to be there to witness it. Evan lowered his gaze, feeling the emotion rise in his chest. Keanu reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. You showed me something too, Keanu said. Something I needed to remember. Evan looked up again. What's that? That even in a place full of fear, love can be stronger than anything. Rachel stepped closer, unable to stay in the doorway any longer. Her eyes glistened as she joined them, wrapping one arm around her son, while keeping her other hand over her heart. Her voice trembled with gratitude she had tried 100 times to put into words, but still couldn't quite capture. Keanu, she said softly, you changed our lives. I don't think we will ever be able to thank you enough. Keanu shook his head gently. You don't have to thank me. The two of you reminded me what hope looks like, what love sounds like. That's a gift I'll carry for the rest of my life. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the place where their lives had collided unexpectedly now holding a new meaning. It wasn't a hallway of fear anymore. It was a hallway of rebirth. Evan hugged his mother tightly, then looked up at Keanu with a grateful smile. I'm going to keep singing. I'm going to help people with music, just like you helped us. Keanu's eyes softened. And you will. You already have. The three of them shared a quiet moment, each taking in the significance of being back where everything began. The once cold corridor now felt warm, vibrant, alive again. Evan lifted his guitar, gently strumming a final soft chord that lingered in the air like a blessing. And with that, the circle closed beautifully, powerfully, and completely. The hallway settled into a peaceful stillness after Evan's final chord faded. The soft echoes of his voice drifted upward, warming a place that once felt heavy with fear. Rachel held her son close, and Keanu stepped back, giving them the space to breathe in this full circle moment. He watched them for a few seconds longer, letting the sight imprint itself on his heart before quietly turning away. As Keanu walked down the long corridor, the lights overhead hummed softly. The air felt lighter now, as if the hospital itself had taken a deep breath and released months of tension. Every step he took replayed pieces of their journey. Evan's trembling voice on that first night, Rachel's stillness and the machines that told a story of uncertainty, the slow spark of life that returned the moment hope found its way back into the room, and the way music, gentle, fragile, determined, stitched their broken pieces together. He reached the end of the hallway and paused, resting one hand on the cool railing. Moments like this were rare, moments where the world felt quiet enough for truth to rise to the surface. He gazed toward a window overlooking the parking lot where the city lights blinked against the night sky. He whispered to himself, letting the words settle in the silence. Hope doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it's a child's voice in a quiet hallway. He thought about how Evan had stood so small beside a hospital bed, armed with nothing but a song and the belief that his mother could still hear him. That belief had been stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than any medical prediction. It had been pure, and it had been powerful enough to bring her back. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply. He had seen pain in his life more than most people ever knew. He had lost loved ones. He had sat in hallways haunted by uncertainty. But tonight reminded him of something he sometimes forgot. The human heart is capable of extraordinary resilience. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a song, a hand on a shoulder, a promise to return, can ignite that resilience again. He pushed open the main hospital doors and stepped into the cool evening air. The city smelled of asphalt and distant ocean salt. A soft breeze lifted his hair, carrying away the last threads of tension he had carried with him. He stopped beside his car, looking back at the glowing windows of the pediatric wing. Somewhere behind those walls, a mother and son were beginning a new chapter, stronger, closer, and forever connected by the music that saved them. He felt grateful that he happened to walk into that hallway, grateful that he could offer something small but meaningful, grateful that strangers could become family in ways the world didn't always understand. He opened his car door but didn't get in yet. Instead, he let the moment sink in fully. The night was quiet, gentle, almost reverent. It felt like a reminder that the world still held beauty in the most unexpected places, and kindness, quiet, steady kindness, would always be powerful enough to change a life. Keanu finally eased himself into the driver's seat, but didn't start the engine. He rested both hands on the steering wheel and exhaled slowly, letting the emotions of the day settle like soft dust around him. Not every story ended this way. Not every hallway gave back what was lost. But tonight felt like a reminder that even in a world filled with noise, the quiet moments were the ones that left the deepest marks. He thought about Evan's voice, small, trembling, yet filled with an unshakable strength, a voice that refused to stop reaching for the person it loved most, a voice that believed even when the world around him didn't. Keanu imagined that first night again, the haunting melody that floated through the hall, guiding him like a thread through darkness. That sound had changed him, and he knew it would stay with him, etched into memory, the way certain songs stay in the soul forever. He leaned back, watching the glow of the hospital windows from where he sat. Life had a way of weaving people into each other's stories without warning. He had walked into the building as a stranger, but he was leaving with something far more meaningful: gratitude, perspective, a renewed understanding of how love, steady, stubborn love, could pull someone back from the edge. He thought of Rachel waking up whispering that she heard her son. He thought of Evan collapsing into her arms, clutching her as if afraid she might disappear again. He thought of the music, soft but determined, filling the room until even the machines seemed to respond. That song meant something different now. It wasn't just a ballad he once helped write. It had become a piece of their family story, a piece of their healing. Keanu smiled softly, a small curve of warmth that reached his eyes. The world often focused on the loud moments, the headlines, the dramatic gestures. But today proved something he had always believed deep down. The most powerful acts of kindness were quiet. They happened when no one was watching. They lived in simple promises, in whispered encouragement, in a child's unwavering devotion. He started the engine, but before pulling away, he allowed himself one last look at the wing, where everything had changed. The lights shimmered gently, like candles burning in honor of a second chance. He hoped Evan would carry this moment for the rest of his life, not because of him, but because of what he discovered within himself. A voice, a purpose, a calling shaped by love. As Keanu drove into the night, he left viewers with a final thought meant to linger long after the story ended. Sometimes the world doesn't change because of grand speeches or loud declarations. Sometimes it changes because one person chooses kindness when it matters most. And now to everyone listening. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's kindness changed everything? And what story would you like to see Keanu Reeves in next?